Welcome back, webheads, to the next episode of Spidey Swing-Bys, where today I, Christian Ashley of Systematic Geekology, will be covering Spider-Man's every appearance from release order. Today we'll be doing Amazing Spider-Man number 7, which features the return of the Vulture as the first villain who has come back into a Spidey story proper. But he is not the only returning Spider-Man villain we'll see this month. And in fact, our next episode will focus on that villain, but we'll get there in a second. So, as we head forward here, let us go ahead and see everything else about this issue. This was released in week 37 in 1963. The release date was September 10th, 1963. The story is called The Return of the Vulture. Imagine that. It is written by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, penciled by Steve Ditko, inked by Steve Ditko, lettered by Artie Simek, and edited by Stan Lee. So, what else was happening in Marvel this month? Well, a lot. As Marvel is continuing to grow, we get some classic stories here. One of them being Avengers 2, when we see the Space Phantom tricking the Avengers into fighting themselves, and the Hulk leaves the team behind, disgusted by the lack of trust in him. The first person to leave the Avengers is the Incredible Hulk. Next up is Journey into Mystery 98, where Thor deals with more relationship drama with Jane Foster and faces off against a contentious Cobra for the first time. Uh, an underrated Thor villain, I'll say, in that he's definitely out of his weight class trying to fight Thor, but when he and Mr. Hyde start teaming up later on, it's a lot better for them. I did enjoy that issue. And next up is Sergeant Fury number 4, where we see the Howling Commandos lose one of their own when they infiltrate Germany to stop propaganda broadcasts from an unwilling newsman. Then we have Tales to Astonish 50, where Giant Man and the Wasp must defeat the Human Top, who, if you don't know who that is, that's okay. He rebrands himself as the more memorable villain, Whirlwind, and has been a staple of their stories for quite some time. Then we have X-Men 2, where the X-Men fight against the Vanisher as he tries to steal military secrets for profit. It's okay. It's about what I can say for that story. Then we have some good old classic Goofy and also some biting satire. It's not satire, political shenanigans as well in Fantastic Four 21, where the Fantastic Four team up with Nick Fury in the then present of the 1960s to bridge him over into the Marvel Universe proper as they both fight against the mad machinations of the hate monger, who is revealed to be a clone of Adolf Hitler himself. You cannot get more comic book than that, but it's actually really well done. It's a really fun story. Then we have Tales of Suspense 48, where Iron Man works to overcome the evil of Mr. Doll in a very forgettable story. In fact, I think Mr. Doll really only appears later on in like some Spider-Woman in her first run, where he actually shows up fairly frequently for a little bit and then kind of just disappears. And the next thing that shows up, we will not be discussing in detail tonight, and that is Strange Tales 115, but we will be covering it next time on Spidey Swing-Bys as we see the Human Torch and a little bit of Spider-Man, not much, but a little bit, facing off against the Sandman as he returns for the first time in Marvel proper. So, with all that in mind, let's get into the actual issue. And we start with a bit of a recap with Spider-Man, with the narration telling us, what happened last time the two of them fought, and now the Vulture is just an honest, law-abiding prisoner. You can trust him to do anything there, of course, including working with machines that somehow relate to the fact that he could use an anti-grav device with magnetics, with magnets and what you call it to float around in the air. So what happens? Well, predictably, the Vulture is able to find a way to rebuild his flying device, which he practices in his cell and then uses it in a very goofy way. It makes sense. It makes sense in context, but it's still so goofy. Uh, During the exercise period in the prison courtyard, he just flies off Even though there's a guard tower there, there's a guard tower any other time, there are armed guards there in the facility, no one decides to shoot the geriatric man fleeing from prison. No, of course, the Vulture has managed to escape from prison with a stunning scheme. Yeah, it's fine. He has to get out of prison somehow. It's one of the reasons I'm gonna rate this as low as I do along the way. He just kinda doesn't. But actually, I think for the time with Marvel, to give them a little bit of grace here, is this is one of the first times that this actually happens in the story, is a supervillain fleeing from prison, and they don't really become, like the stereotype that we have for Arkham Asylum or The Raft or what have you along the way of, they're just easy to get into and easy to leave. Like, the Joker is gonna get caught by Batman, and 2 days later, he's escaped the asylum or running it. Like, it's just how it is. That's because comics have abused and abused this, but for right now, it's fine. But we see at school there, uh, that they're in gym and for volleyball practice, and this is a very large volleyball, by the way. I don't know what really was going on in Ditko's mind when he was drawing that, but we hear one of the students listening to their radio Walkman device thing here. Walkman wouldn't be in existence for a couple of decades, but he is hearing about the escape of the Vulture, which of course makes Peter upset, and he asks to be excused because, well, he fought him the last time. He wants to fight him again. And of course, Flash Thompson makes fun of him because volleyball is just too much for poor puny Parker. Great alliteration there, Flash. And he kind of has a point. I mean, based on the fact that he knows about poor puny Parker, it's like, oh, volleyball's too much for you, you little wimp. Like, you be better than that. If you had like some debilitating illness or something, like you cut your little slack. But Peter complains about a headache, and Flash even remarks, which is showing that Flash is not all stupid. He's not an idiot. Like there's a brain in there. It says, strange how you always get those headaches whenever something exciting is going on. So like he obviously doesn't connect the dots until way, way later, but that's still the start of it right there. And Peter even laments the fact that he has to keep up this whole double identity thing. If it weren't for, protecting Aunt May, like maybe he could even get by with being known as Peter Parker. But he suits up, gets ready, and has organized his suit to where now he can use his camera alongside his web shooters to take pics for the Bugle. So showing his ingenuity there, and he waits. And a very interesting scene here for about 20 minutes or so because the spider sense has been going off. He went there in the middle of the day, but if he leaves, people will see him because it's a suburban neighborhood in the middle of the day instead of at night when he typically tries to slip out. So it's a very cutesy little scene where, there's a kid who sees Spider-Man swinging by, and of course his parents don't believe him. The Vulture is confronted by the police, manages to slip away from them with his even faster wings this time around, and goes into this one room, which is a jewelry showroom, has a corny line about how, he's asked how he got in there, and he says, "The same way I shall leave, with your most valuable gems. Just watch me," which doesn't make much sense when you think about it. Like, he didn't come in there with the gems, but it is what it is. It's good old Stan dialogue there. Vulture flees, and in order to prevent himself from being tracked by radar, which, I mean, that's pretty smart on his part, um, he flies very low, which means, of course, the people can see him, but the police also can't shoot him because if they did, they might hit a bystander. So, very well done gun control there on the half of the police. So, Spider-Man eventually does confront the Vulture, as he is a very obvious target in the midst of all this. You see a guy in a green suit flying around, kind of attracts attention. So, knowing that he defeated them last time with the magnetic device that he created, the anti-magnetic device, the Vulture has modified himself. But Spider-Man hasn't thought that much through and thinks, oh, well, if it worked the last time, it'll work this time. So in a very actually, this is something that Doctor Doom would do often, especially, I mean, he's done it since then, but in early Marvel, say, hey, that plan didn't work this time, so I'm going to try it this way this time around. So Vulture, I'll give him some props here. Like, he may be 170 years old by the look of him, but he is pretty smart. So he's able to trick Spider-Man, and that the device that Spider-Man tries to use to mess with the magnetism is working, which puts Peter in a position, oh, he's going to take him down, but his spider sense goes off. But this is a good way of showing how spider sense is not like 100% effective tactic. It's not something you can always 100% rely on because, yeah, it'll go off, but will you have the time to react? And this time he doesn't, as the vulture does punch him, which I don't really know how he's able to actually hurt him at this point in time, as old as he is, but we'll go with it. That's one of the other gripes I have with this one. And has actually beaten Spider-Man for a little bit. That he's kind of off his balance. He tries to use this webbing to get a line somewhere, but it fails, and he falls down hard on a rooftop and ends up spraining his shoulder. But the Vulture sees him lying there, thinks he's dead, and instead of confirming it like a good villain, flies away. As everyone is freaking out in the streets, the Vulture defeated Spider-Man, and even the police are like, "Hey, everyone kind of believes Jameson's editorials, but we always kind of thought he was on our side, and now he's gone." But of course, Spider-Man is not dead. This is his magazine. This is not time for Doctor Octopus to take over his mind for as many issues that took way longer than it should have. Peter Parker is still alive, but he is hurt. It feels like it's broken, but it's actually just a sprain. So he goes back home to recuperate, and who should be there but Aunt May, who thinks that she's heard Peter come in, which she has. But we get in this panel right here, one of the first times that I can remember, I'm fairly certain this may even be the first time, of Peter Parker clinging to the ceiling while someone has entered the room that he was going to be in while he was in the midst of dressing out of the costume, his spider sense, kind of warning him that's going to happen. And then someone enters the room, asks where he's at, but he's not there. Like this will happen when he and Harry Osborn are roommates, when some people try and get into his apartment later on. Like this is a good panel. I mean, it's only one panel, but it does an effective job of showcasing like his powers and his ingenuity, and the fact that if he's found out here, there are major consequences if Aunt May finds out that the Spider-Man that she's so afraid of is her nephew. So Peter goes back into civilian attire. He does go to the doctor, to make sure, worrying poor Aunt May, but it's at that point he brings up that he got it in a uh, she brings up he got it in a dangerous volleyball game in the schoolyard. Of course, she falls for it hook, line, and sinker because this is the dumber Aunt May than we would get later on. She's just old and feeble and she needs to be taken care of. But she loves her nephew, the boy who's become her son. So she's asking him, don't do it. And he sheepishly agrees not to do it. So we also get, as Peter goes back to school, he is put in a sling by the doctor. And Flash makes fun of him again. And some pretty clever lines here that Stan wrote for Flash, and I don't know if Steve had any involvement here. It's kind of with all that mess up, you don't really know who had what to say. But Flash makes fun of him and says, "Hey, where's your Purple Heart medal, Petey boy?" Which is a pretty good zinger. And he keeps just messing with him. Like, how big brave Peter hurt his poor little arm. Did you try to turn too many heavy pages at one time, bookworm? Or did you drop a nasty little test tube on it in the lab? Like, these are good. Like, it's obvious we're not supposed to like Flash for saying these things, but you gotta respect the game when it's done well. And Liz is laughing with everyone else, which makes Peter even angrier. So they think that, he's blushing, but it's actually because he's just that mad at everyone. But being who he is, he's holding back. He could easily rip everyone apart right here. But that's not who Spider-Man is. That's not who Peter is. He's going to take the bullying. He's going to take it all in stride while it's still going to bother him immensely. But he's not going to go to the same level as them, especially while he's in the form of Peter Parker. So we see the Vulture planning for his next scheme, where he's decided that he's going to go to the offices of J. Jonah Jameson at the Daily Bugle because he employs hundreds of workers. Therefore, there must be a bunch of money there just ready to be grabbed at any point in time, which is not how the money worked. But Vulture doesn't know that because I don't know why. I guess he doesn't understand economics. So he's gone to the Daily Bugle. But before that happens, we do have a nice little scene between Peter and Betty where, she's asking him how he got into, the cast. Excuse me. Yeah. Not sprained as string or whatever the heck they call it. I said it earlier. It's already gone past me. And she asks him, it basically says, "Hey, nobody could have sprained his arm playing volleyball," and asks him what really happened. So he says, "Okay, I'll tell you the truth," which he does. That it happened in the air while he was fighting the Vulture for dear life. And she's this very little funny little panel there where she's just like, "Okay, well, ask a silly question," and he just asked her to stick to the volleyball story. So that's obviously a lie. She knows it's a lie, but she plays along with it because, maybe it's something that embarrasses him or something like that. But, he said the truth. It's just, of course, he was hiding the truth through sarcasm, which is in effect still lying. But there we go. But Jameson then asks Peter to come to him, and they're talking about how he needs to see photos of, the Vulture. The ones he did were good, but they're not worth like paying him his like normal rate. And the Vulture then swoops inside and demands the payroll of everyone there to have all that money. So he and Jameson get into an argument as they both bluster back and forth of, I couldn't possibly give you that money. Like, think of all the people think of all the work that I've done to get that money here. And of course, it's greedy Jameson versus the greedy Vulture. It's very well played for comedy here. Peter manages to slip away, puts his stuff aside for a second, and then gets back into costume, swings in through the window. The Vulture has brought a gun, which I don't remember him having that. So maybe he did earlier and I just forgot about it, and attempts to shoot Spider-Man, which is, yeah, it's a valid point. But of course, Spider-Man at this point in time, yeah, he's been agile before. People don't know he's able to get out of the way as much as possible, but he webs up the bullet, excuse me, the gun anyways, attacks the Vulture, who is using Jameson as a shield, pulling him away to try and block Spider-Man's blows, which of course means that Peter has to hold back for a little bit because, it is Jameson, but he still has to, he doesn't want to hurt the man. Betty sees all this madness, runs away, hides from this as she sees the Vulture, then Spider-Man, then Jameson, which I think out of all those, I'm probably more scared of Jameson for her. And she just kind of like gets away and say, I'm staying here where it's safe, which I get it, girl. You see all that madness? Forget about it. Like, just stay there and be safe. So we go to Spider-Man and the Vulture, and kind of as a third party attacker here is Jameson, who is complaining the entire time that they're wrecking the Daily Bugle. And he's like, I don't know if this is covered by insurance or anything like that. So he's getting upset that all of his ledgers and files are being thrown away. And Spider-Man's having none of it, telling him to go slide down a barbed wire fence, which is a very amusing image for JJJ to have to endure. The Vulture tries to flee, um, as Spider-Man follows after him, gets on top of him, and they're about to be he's about to be crushed by the rollers, but he manages to get out of the way just in time as the fight continues, and then leave the Bugle behind. And his spider sense goes off, but knowing what happened earlier, Peter actually uses that to advantage to let him be attacked by the Vulture, which gets him closer to the Vulture as he then webs up one of his wings, which is a stellar point way to win this fight, even though it means that both of them are going to probably plummet to their deaths. But since he's more in control this time, Peter is able to craft his web shooters into a parachute while still keeping the Vulture in that way. He can't escape as people out on the street are all remarking about how Spider-Man has won. He's beaten him by some miracle. Spider-Man won. And that's what Adrian Toomes, I'm still sure we haven't gotten his name at this point in time. If we have, I've completely forgotten it. The Vulture, we'll just say, has realized this was Spider-Man's plan all the time. Like, yeah, they're both kind of at the advantage out in the open. And we didn't get to the point where he's swept up the Vulture, but there's one villain for Spider-Man to face in this issue, and that's J. Jonah Jameson, who Peter's like, well, maybe he's trying to apologize to me. There's still that optimism inside of him that maybe even Jameson could change, but nope. He's going to hold Spider-Man responsible for everything that was done to the building, all the damage done there, and which of course Peter calls him a professional nut because like that's not his fault that this all happened. Like he saved everyone in there. Sure, there was some collateral damage, but that's not his fault. And he's about to get away, but then Jameson just pushes one button too many. So what does Peter do? He webs up his mouth, leaving his nose open, so that way he can still breathe through there. It's a good thing it's not allergy season because then Jameson would really be screwed. But it's a good way of like showing like, hey, I could do even worse to you, quit bullying me, I'll show you what happens to people who bully me. And Jameson will, be gone in like an hour or something like that. It'll get, all the swearing censored by being muffled by the webbing. So Peter then goes back inside the bugle, gets back into his costume, put himself sling. That's what I was looking for. Puts himself back in a sling and finds Betty there, who is still hiding, poor thing, very understandably so. And he asks if he can join her, and she says, "Be my guest." And she asked him where he was hiding. It says, "Oh, excuse me, where he was during the battle with the Vulture." And he says, "Oh, I was hiding in a closet." And it's like, "Hey, I'm afraid I'm just not the heroic type," which we know isn't true. But from Betty's perspective, it makes perfect sense. Like, he's just a guy. What would she expect him to do in a fight between the Vulture, Spider-Man, and Jameson? So he ran. Like, it's perfectly natural. So, and she admits that she's not really the heroic type either. And there's a very cute little scene between the two of them there as Jameson runs, runs, demanding someone to get the webbing off of him. And Betty kind of brings up the point. It's like, it's like, sometimes I get the feeling that you're laughing at a secret little joke that's all your own. And as they get a little closer, you start smelling her perfume and says, "Hey, if you keep using that cool perfume, Betty, I may break down and tell you about it someday." It's like a little bit of chemistry there. And she remarks about how that's the closest thing to a romantic remark she's ever heard him say. And he tells her he can be more romantic than that. And, gives her that good old classic blue eyes line, just like he did for Liz a while back. And she asks him, "But what will Jameson say about all this?" As they're talking about the silence. And Peter, who knows the webbing will dissolve in an hour, says, "Nothing, baby, for at least an hour." That is a good line. That is a good way. Like, I always liked Peter and Betty as a couple, at least for like the starter girlfriend kind of thing. I never thought she should be marriage material or anything like that. But they had a really nice rapport early on. That unfortunately, like many things in his life, would be ruined by him also being Spider-Man. When her brother comes in, when she's having to deal with the crime in that part of the way, and dealing with Peter, saying he's going to be somewhere, but then showing up elsewhere because he has responsibilities as Peter and Spider-Man. I really do enjoy what they share there. And it's nice to see this develop. At the same time, he's also got that attraction to Liz Allen. Like, this is before Mary Jane Watson. This is before Gwen Stacy or anything else. This is really a very, like I said, very sweet, very wholesome way of like, hey, we just survived this really crazy encounter with this kooky villain, this geriatric man in this green wingsuit who's threatened to take all our money. And they just spend time together. So that's the issue. How do I feel about it? Not the most positive. It's a fine story. There's nothing in here that really offends me. My gripes with it, but it's not like, yes, everyone should read Amazing Spider-Man #7. No, this is more like a 6.5 out of 10. And that's still, I mean, you'd have to be, for me, how I grade things. I don't know if I've spoken about this before, is that to be at a 5 or below, there is something in this story that makes me angry or upset or like mad that this doesn't make sense. So why are you trying to tell the story this way? This is one of those. Yeah, there's some stupid kooky things and stupid kooky Marvel stuff, but it's fine. It's not good, but it's fine. So that was Amazing Spider-Man #7. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below. Really like to hear you guys' opinions as we continue on. But next up, like I said earlier, we will be in Strange Tales #115 to see the Human Torch go against the Sandman and have a special appearance by Spider-Man. And that kind of means he's not going to show up a lot. But for the purposes of this, he shows up enough for me to cover it. As time goes on, there would be plenty of those where like he might show up for like one panel because something crazy is going on or blah blah blah, something like that. And I probably will just mention them and not do a full episode on them. But for one like this, like from what I recall, like there's enough in there for us to do a full episode on it. So what do you guys think? Is there anything I missed? Is there anything you would like me to have focused on more? Let me know. I'm all ears. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. So until next time, webheads.